Hi, I'm Kristin. Welcome to the Transforming Hearts podcast, brought to you by the Institute for Ministry Formation. We believe that transforming the church starts with transforming hearts. Join us as we explore ministry through the lens of relationship and accompaniment. Together, let's journey towards growth, healing, and transformation. Hello and welcome to the Transforming Hearts podcast. This is Kristin with the Institute for Ministry Formation, and today we are excited to have Dr. Michael Krom on the show. So Dr. Krom is a professor and chair of philosophy at St. Vincent College. He's the director of the Benedictine Leadership Studies program and also the director of the Faith and Reason Summer program. And so many of you know that the IMF is part of the St. Vincent community. So the St. Vincent community is comprised of the St. Vincent Arch Abbey, the St. Vincent Basilica, the St. Vincent Seminary, and the St. Vincent College. And so today we're really excited to highlight how the Holy Spirit is at work in the college, specifically through the Benedictine Leadership Studies program, of which Dr. Krom is the director. So Dr. Krom, it's good to have you on the show.
It's good to be on the show. Thanks for having me, Kristin.
And maybe we can just start by having you share a little bit about yourself, and then you can share a little bit about the Benedictine Leadership Studies program.
Sure. Yeah. So why don't I just maybe tell a little of my journey that led me to St. Vincent and then to becoming the director of the Benedictine Leadership Studies program. I'm from the West Coast, and I'm a convert, so that's usually people lead with that because they know that that means something to start with, having come into the church really in college, actually. And I originally thought I was going to medical school on the West Coast, and found a love for philosophy in a Catholic liberal arts college, St. Mary's College, out there. And I really did come kicking and screaming. I just thought that religion in general, was a thing of the past and superstitious and so forth, and was really convicted by the truth that the great thinkers of the ages, the philosophers, pointed toward the truth, and that the Bible and great theologians like Augustine and Aquinas helped to show that the fullness of truth is in the person of Jesus Christ. And so I was baptized right after college, and then my master's and PhD on the East Coast. I was down in Atlanta in 2007 when I applied for this job, and I'd never heard of St. Vincent, either the Arch Abbey, the seminary, the college. And when I came up for the interview, I was struck by the sincere hospitality. I was coming from the South, and even where hospitality is taken seriously, it was noticeable, including among the students. That was really a wonderful welcome to the community. And then when I was offered the job, I just really felt that the Holy Spirit was calling me to be here. It was my first exposure to a Benedictine monastery and a Benedictine community, and so that's been exciting to learn about what is distinctly Benedictine in spiritual formation, but more specifically in the context of college formation, of the kind of curriculum, the kind of community we're going to have. And so I've been involved in many activities outside of teaching philosophy classes, like the summer program, for example, which is for high school students. And when this program was started around 2012 was the planning really got started. I was asked to just teach a class, an ethics class for it, and then lead a trip to Rome, which was exciting to get to go spring break on a pilgrimage to Rome. And then about 5 years ago, take over the Benedictine Leadership Studies program as the director. So the last 5 years, of course, COVID was difficult to try to really think about how do you form character and form students as disciples in the midst of that. But we learned a lot. And I think the program is really hit its stride in the last couple years, which is exciting when we realize how so many people feel like they've never really come out of COVID in terms of their communities recovering, that I really think our program has actually taken off and accelerated.
Oh, wow. Beautiful. So give us a little bit of like the nuts and bolts of the program. So who is it for? What are the learning objectives? How does it form students?
Sure, and I'll start too with the founder, Professor Mark Abramovic, came here really as a retirement job from the energy sector. He was a CFO, and it was not Catholic. Didn't come here as having a Catholic background. He read the Rule of Saint Benedict, and he said, "This is the model of leadership
Wow.
that we need." And he had gone to all these business leadership programs and just found them wanting. And it's a real testament to the genius of Saint Benedict, that
Yes.
across this 1500-year gap, and even among someone who's not formed in a Christian or a Catholic educational context, saw that immediately. And so what he wanted was a distinctively Catholic Benedictine liberal arts approach to leadership, which is the mission of St. Vincent College. And when we set up the program, then in terms of mission statement, we made it clear that it's forming servant leaders rooted in the teachings of the Catholic Church and in Benedictine spirituality. And high school seniors then apply for the program. We admit about 20 each year who join what we call cohorts, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. And they can be any major that the college offers, which is one of the things that might attract those more intentionally Catholic students from strong Catholic families to St. Vincent, is that we have a wide variety of majors from pre-professional to, liberal arts and philosophy and theology that they might not find at a smaller Catholic college. And so they can come here and get that very specific formation in, say, nursing, engineering, finance, and so forth, but in that intentional immersion, let's say, model of taking courses in common and doing activities outside of courses, including retreats with campus ministry, that are going to make sure that their education is not just training them to do a job, but forming them to discern their vocation and to live it out
Mhm.
faithfully.
Beautiful. I love that. I love how you mentioned a few things about our Benedictine spirituality. You said at the college, obviously, the founder of the program, remind me of his name.
Mark Abramovic.
Okay, great. How he really saw St. Benedict's teaching as a model of leadership formation. And so, how does that model really, how is that lived out in the BLS program?
I'll maybe just give the different components of the program.
Sure.
And the first one, which is not essential for the students, but they're invited to live in, we have what are called pods for the freshman year, where it's a community of, say, 30 students that live in the same pod, that we invite them into the honors pod, where they're going to get an opportunity that, when they go back, that they're forming an intentional community. And community is central to Benedictine spirituality. In terms of the courses, then they're taking courses in our core curriculum at St. Vincent that would be ones that would help them to come to know the intellectual foundations of the program. So, for example, a class on St. Thomas Aquinas's moral philosophy, which is what I teach, or a theology class on Psalms and wisdom literature, which Dr. Petrani teaches. Dr. Petrani in
Mm-hmm.
the theology department. So, on the academic side, it's courses that are really focused on Catholic Benedictine liberal arts mission and being, understanding it more fully. In addition to that, they have formation components throughout their 4 years. We use StrengthsFinder as the foundation. Actually, Brother Francisco is the one who gives the foundation for the students. And then at the end of each semester, they meet with a faculty or Benedictine mentor to really the goal there is just to help them to reflect on what have they found is going well, some strength that they have that they were surprised by. I like the word jolts, a jolt that
Sure.
you've had. That sometimes those jolts are negative ones. I thought I was good at this, and it turns out I'm not. And so just for them to get a chance to really think through, how do I discern what God is calling me to in the midst of my studies? Because their primary focus, of course, right now is study and learning how to discern what God is calling them to do in the midst of that. So that's one of the main parts of the formation academic that we then build on activities like they do a campus ministry retreat, a weekend retreat every year. They'll do at least one with them. They do service projects, and then we have career center activities. Let's make your resume from the beginning and work your way up more toward interview skills. Dress for Humility is one of the workshops they do, where they're learning to dress professionally and in the context of a Christian understanding of human dignity. And then they also have these experiential learning, would be anything from going to a lecture to going to a trip at Notre Dame. We go every fall there for an ethics conference, to classical music or the opera. That's really varied. But we have some big activities that we do that it would be worth sharing there. The one that is obviously a big attraction for people is all of our students go to Rome for the spring break of senior year for a pilgrimage as part of the capstone class. And that trip is actually free, by the way. So that's another thing that mom and dad like to hear is
Right,
that
right.
we've got some wonderful donors to keep that free for students. And so you can imagine this 4 years of really getting to know that 15 to 20 people who are part of your cohort, taking classes
Mm-hmm.
together, doing projects together. Then in the senior year spring break, as students often say, I knew this was all real and true. I knew St. Benedict was a real person, and
Mm-hmm.
all my life I, knew about the apostles and about Rome. But now I'm actually seeing it, and there's this way in which it's really real now. That all of these things that I've been believing and of course struggling with. Belief is a hard thing. Have just been strengthened by that commitment that this program has prepared me for whatever God has in store for me.
I think that's so beautiful. And even so, drawing from your own personal experience of coming to faith as a college student, and how formative those years are. And I know from even my own story, my own background, college was a big deal for me. I went to Franciscan University and experienced a lot of formation there, the study abroad program in Austria. And I sincerely mean this when I say I experienced like a transformation. That, as you say, this wasn't just education, skills, and a job. I was a communication arts major, but my whole person was being formed in community and through the spiritual formation. And I think this is just so beautiful that students would have an opportunity to really be formed in their whole person, and in their unique design, and in vocational discernment, and really this discovery of how God has created them, and then where they can live their gifts in the world beyond college. So, what a beautiful program BLS is. Dr. Krom, do you have any stories of transformation in the students, of their experience going through the program?
The first, just which is more general and not so much a specific student, but experience that I've had is when because most of these students, they're more likely to have come from a very strong, intentionally Catholic home, one that I didn't have myself. And so they're already coming with, let's say, a piety and a background, of course, in theology or basic levels and so forth. But the thing that you realize is they're still their parents' kids. They're
Mm.
still not fully adults in their thinking and their ability to organize and guide their own lives. And so even these students who are coming in with all of that great background still struggle with just basic being responsible for themselves and doing things like coming to class every time or getting assignments done and so forth. But more specifically, which speaks to Benedictine spirituality, getting them to think as a member of a community.
Mm.
That's the transformation that I most focus on as being distinctively Benedictine. When you think of the way that for 1,500 years, men and women who've been rooted in Benedictine abbeys have taken this vow to, in this case specifically, thinking about stability, that you are committed to one place. And to go from just thinking that this is the college I chose because I thought it would be good for me and I would get something out of it, and future me will have a job and will maybe find a spouse and so forth. Going from that to thinking about, I came here to intentionally be rooted in a community that I'm called to serve, that
Wow.
my salvation will be worked out in fear and trembling through the commitment to being a member here. And that's really hard to get students to think in those terms. And it's hard on my part as the director to remember that they're still young, to have the patience, the forgiveness to, on the one hand, challenge them to an appropriate level of this is what's reachable for them, but also to recognize that they need some mercy and they're rough around the edges, as it were. And so that's something I think we really want to get them to do, to where and I'm not saying that we reach this as much as I would like, but that they will on their own say, hey, there's a service that could, a service project, or there's someone in the community that could really use some help. And though I don't need it for the credit for the program, and though it wasn't something that was set up by a leader in the community, I can be someone who addresses
Wow.
that.
Yes.
And that's what it means to be formed as a leader, is that by the time they get out, we're hoping that they're ready to, and this is actually something we do in the program. They have a major project they're supposed to do that you first learn by listening, by being obedient and being humble, forming yourself in the love of God and neighbor as self. And as you go through the 4 years, you gradually learn what's needed here and how you can serve in that community, as distinct from, there's this thing that I'm really interested in that I wish they had here, that's something for me and for my kind of my own, kind of well-being, as it were. So I hope that's clear, that transformation from thinking about myself to thinking about love, which is
Yeah.
directing our will toward the good of our neighbor.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful when you said getting them to think as a member of a community, which is a huge mindset shift for all of us, but especially at that age, 18, 19, 20, 21, when you really just have been a consumer. You're your parents' kid, right?
Right.
And so a community that you belong to and a community that you are called to serve. And as you said, this is what it means to be formed as a leader. So that is exceptionally transformative, especially in this day and age, and especially like in our individual society culture. This is what I get. This is for me. This is what I need. But to be really a self gift in community and to be forming these young people in that mindset is really beautiful.
Right. And I'm thinking too, in chapter 72 of the Rule, Benedict, just the second to last chapter, where he talks about the good zeal, that there's a good zeal and there's a bad zeal. That the good zeal of the brothers is shown in almost competing with one another to serve and to be
Mm-hmm.
obedient.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a kind of competition I can get behind.
Yeah.
That often there's thinking about, there's these finite resources in my community and I'm trying to maximize them for me. I'm trying to figure out how can I get more of them directed to me, more opportunities, more of whatever it may be. Whereas the focus of Benedict in the Rule is to this renunciation of the will that involves itself in things like trying to strive to be less needy, to especially when it comes to the material goods of the community. And I also think another part of that, which I didn't mention, is mental challenges, psychological challenges. That another thing that's I would not have known just as a professor. I wouldn't have had this many conversations as I've had at directing this program where there's more of a formation, is the number of students who, again, everything seems to be going great for them. This great family back home, strong Catholic faith. They're going to mass. They're doing great in their major, and they'll speak about how lonely they are and how much they miss home. And I don't know if I belong here anymore. And you think, I would never have guessed that from the way you are around the community, from the way people think about you. And I think what that focus on serving in a community does is it really does help with that. Both those who are just homesick, which is natural and actually a good thing, to say that I love my family and I miss them, but also just the anxieties and worries that are so common for all of us, but especially post-COVID among young people, is that the less you think about yourself and the more you think about what the community needs and what you can contribute, the happier you are too. And those anxieties and fears that you're bringing with you stem really from being absorbed in yourself. And so there's I've seen how powerful that can be, of just getting students to get committed in various parts of campus life, in clubs and campus ministry, on their sports team, and that this brings a kind of a freedom from that, in some ways, social media induced or just general struggles at that age of life that they face.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, when we feel like we have something to offer, it helps us understand, like, my life is a gift. I'm a member of this community. I have something to offer. I can offer something, and I belong somewhere. So I really love the communal aspect, both the idea that people are giving of themselves in the community, but the way that they're also receiving love and care. I would assume you said there's 15 to 20 people in the BLS program, and how they come together and have these shared experiences on retreats. And I would assume that that's very transformative as well, as experience of belonging somewhere.
In two senses come up there, and you originally asked about specific stories. So one story comes to mind I think would be worth sharing. But first thing, here that I think really does come to mind with students, trying to, again, find their place in a community, is that it's one thing you can think of unhealthy relationships that are needy, where people are needy, and that's a problem. But that's a different thing from saying that there's a role for you in a community, that there's a place for you, that you contribute something, you're needed, as distinct from there's a kind of neediness that people are taking something from you in a certain way. And that's a helpful, I think, distinction to make there. But the specific story that is on my mind now because of an award that we created is student Julia Sarnowski, who graduated 2 years ago, so in 2023, that during COVID, it was really hard to just find how are we even allowed to do activities with the various restrictions that are in place, that you can't really travel anywhere during COVID, and we're in a rural campus. So I would just email students to say, let's try to find things we can do to, again, service projects or to help foster community. And I tried out a few things that what was so, and I would say, send me an email. I'd be happy to work something out with you. And Julie was one of the students who's really stood out in just taking that initiative of, here's something I noticed that was a need in the community. In her case, there's the monks cemetery on the top of campus. A lot of the tombstones are in various states of disrepair. They've rusted and so forth. And so she just noticed this need for, the corporal work of mercy of caring for the deceased, those who, made possible us being here, and emailed me, why don't we start a project of restoring the tombstones? And I get emails like that from students sometimes, and then that's the end of it. I'll say, oh, that sounds great. Why don't we think that through and what that would entail? And then that good idea doesn't develop to action. I'm sure some of us have that same problem in our lives. We're saying, I got this idea here, and then 9/10 of the work is, the end part, which we don't want to do. And so Julia followed up on it, and it led to a project that is actually the first phase is finished, that people from the community, a lot of retirees after COVID, saw this happening and said, what are you doing here? And it developed a community that gathers together to restore the crosses. So 700 plus tombstones have been restored because one person
Wow.
would just during COVID, rather than kind of wallowing in woe is me, which I'm guilty of, I certainly did enough of that during COVID, said, what can I do to make things better for our community in hard times, and translate it into action. And I mean, that's Benedictine service, I think, and that really community and going beyond the grave community culture that she was a part of, and that she was enabled to put into action.
Wow, that's a beautiful story. And then maybe just like in the last few minutes that we have left, if you could share a little bit about the Rome trip, how that has impacted students in their formation in the BLS program.
And me, it's been a wonderful
Mm.
opportunity, as you can imagine, the fact that I get
Mm-hmm.
to do this. And I do, just to mention this briefly too, that we also developed two other travel opportunities. One is much smaller. We do a backpacking trip in the fall. It's called Outdoor Leadership Class, and so they do 4 miles of 40 miles of backpacking over 4 nights in the fall, and that's a pretty intense experience. We call it traveling monastery. So that's just an elective students have. We also have a relationship with a Benedictine abbey in Senegal in West Africa. And so students, my wife and I led a trip 2 years ago over Christmas break to really just to pray and work with the monks there. So that's another opportunity students have, which is tremendous. But the Rome program specifically, which is pretty much all students do the Rome program. Everyone can do it who wants to do it, and some might decide to do Senegal instead. But so what they do is throughout the senior year, there's a reading packet of it's a 2,700 year history. There's a lot to cover, that we really want them to have the basics of the story of the Eternal City, some of those famous and infamous leaders of Roman history, to really think through how did these people who shaped Rome and made it what it is today live up to the teachings of the church and Benedictine spirituality, or how did they fail to? And sometimes we learn about the importance of things like love and prayer, humility, obedience, through people who failed to do it, and the consequences for themselves and their community. So they do that in the fall. And then the spring break trip is we pack in a lot, as you can imagine, that in a week you just feel like you're scratching the surface in Rome. We live in at San Anselmo, which is the International House of Studies for Benedictines studying in Rome. So you have monks from all over the world. There's 50, 60 some countries represented there, and we have some of the meals in common with them. So we live in the guest residence there, right in the heart of Rome. It's on the Aventine Hill, which is one of the two original of the 7 hills of Rome. And we structure it following that, as much as possible, following the path of history, to say that, once we get our feet wet and on Sunday have a day of rest and just exploring the city, that Monday through Friday are these 5 periods of Rome, where you're now seeing the places where these events and these leaders walked. And of course, there's a strong Benedictine focus in there, that we go both to Subiaco, which is when Benedict he went to the St. Vincent College of Rome in the 5th century, that when Benedict went to Rome, he fled Rome because of the corruption at the time and the desire to be alone with God. And so we go to the Holy Cave, where Benedict first became the spiritual master, where he first emerged from this cave to found monasteries. And then on another day, we go to Monte Cassino, which is generally seen as the mother house of the Benedictine family, and where the rule was written. And for the students, it's tremendous to see that most of them, when they came to St. Vincent, they don't know much about St. Benedict's story. He's unfortunately not covered as much as he should be in a K through 12. Even a solid Catholic classical or liberal arts formation doesn't often give much attention to him. And so here they are 4 years later. just having this intense connection that this is where this man wrote this rule that
Mm.
preserved so much of our Western heritage and made possible them to be students at St.
Mhm.
Vincent College
Mhm.
who are, as it were, downstream from St. Vincent Arch Abbey and what you're doing, in your program and with Father Boniface.
Oh, that connection is so powerful, that they can experience Saint Benedict in such a beautiful and profound way. Yeah, thank you for sharing about that, Dr. Krom. I've really appreciated chatting with you today, especially. The name of this podcast is Transforming Hearts, and just to hear how you're transforming hearts of our young people, transforming leadership, transforming the church through really the heart and charism of Saint Benedict. I think he's a real gift for the church. And just a little side note, he was my Saint of the Year, kind of by a surprise. He picked me, and learning more about his heart, his teaching, his wisdom, and finding great transformation by following him.
Right, and the same for me as well. And this is my first Benedictine community, and I have to say, Benedictine spirituality goes really well with family life, and I've
Mm.
really appreciated that. I'm a philosopher, I'm an intellectual, and sometimes I need something that's more meat and potatoes, as it were.
Sure.
And Benedict it's so good at this focus on when the bells ring for prayer, or this reminder that any work I'm doing has to be directed to give glory to God and to serve my family, which is my primary vocation. It's really just an added grace that I get to do this and as my job.
Yeah. Oh, yes, for sure. Thank you for sharing that as well. So we're at the end of our time together, Dr. Krom. I will put a link to the BLS program in our show notes today, as well as the link to the Faith and Reason summer program. There is a website for that as well.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So, well, thank you, Dr. Krom, for sharing with us today, and most especially, thank you for sharing from your heart.
Thanks so much. God bless.